In Guatemala, social organizations advance in their second day of protests and mobilizations against government corruption. The Russian Defense Ministry denounced before the UN Security Council that the Pentagon controls about 60 military biological laboratories on the borders of Russia and China. And thousands of Sudanese demonstrators marched in the nation's capital and other cities Wednesday in new protest against the military coup that plunged the African country into political turmoil and aggravated its economic woes. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. And now we begin. In Guatemala, civil, indigenous, and farmers' organizations advance in their second day of protests and mobilizations against government corruption and the high cost of life. This Wednesday, a rally is expected to take place in the Human Rights Square in front of the Supreme Court of Justice in the country's capital to demand answers from this body to the questions about transparency. Protesters are also demanding an end to the systematic state of violence, while at the same time asking the nominating commission in charge of the election of the Attorney General to exclude Consuelo Porras, the current head of the Public Prosecutor's Office, from the process because they consider her to be close to the national executive. The demonstrators also warned on Tuesday about the deterioration of democracy and the scarce constitutional guarantees in the Central American country. Peruvian authorities reported 1 dead and 15 injured during a day of protests that took place on Wednesday morning in the country. A farm worker participating in the blockade of the Pan American Highway lost his life during a clash involving police and protesters in the Ica region, some 300 kilometers from Lima. The incident occurred while uniformed officers were trying to clear the Pan American Highway. The clash wounded 15 people, among them 12 policemen and 3 civilians. One of the victims was seriously injured. In Peru, President Pedro Castillo asked the Congress to work in a coordinated way to find solutions to the transporter demands. The idea came during a meeting with the board of directors to reach a consensus to the problems that the country is going through. The president pointed out that the ministers and the working commissions of the legislature should participate in the talks to advance cooperation and seek a solution to the strike. Castillo also declared before Parliament that the decision of total immobility on Lima and Callao does not go against the people, but seeks to protect the health and life of citizens. For his part, the head of the Ministry of Justice and Human Rights, Felix Chero, reported that the Congress and the executive have reached agreements that could satisfy the demands of the population in the face of the recent protests in the country. In Ecuador, authorities informed that the 20 inmates killed on Sunday in a violent riot in the Turi prison were identified. The head of the government's Human Rights Secretariat, Bernarda Ordóñez, said that the forensic teams have carried out all the identification procedures, managing to find the identity of the 20 inmates, of whom 15 bodies have already been handed over to their families. She also informed that logistical aspects were coordinated to facilitate the transfer of the coffins to other provinces where the victims were from. Sunday's riot in the city of Cuenca, capital of the province of Azuay, was the first to be recorded this year, following a wave of prison riots in 2021 that left 331 inmates dead, as part of the serious crisis facing the prison system in Ecuador. And prices continue to rise in Colombia, and inflation in the first quarter of the year is already similar to the price increase registered during 2021. The Bank of the Republic in Colombia reports that in March, inflation was at 1%, so the country accumulates an increase of 4.36% in the consumer price index during the first quarter of the year. According to a statement issued by the bank, the variation over the past 12 months was 8.53%, an exponential growth of 7.02 percentage points compared to the same period the previous year. The bank said that food and non-alcoholic beverages and an inflation of 25.37% over the past 12 months, and the products that had the most increase in prices were potatoes, 110.22%, yam, 85.14%, and bananas, 82.57%. In Venezuela, the 16th National History Congress, on its third international edition, is underway in the historic center of the La Guaira state. Event organizers said around 700 papers have already been submitted, and there are more than 1,000 registered participants. The organizers said that the public can go to the historical center of La Guaira on Bolivar Street to enjoy lectures, debates, and cultural and recreational activities, which are also part of the event. Likewise, the organizing committee said this edition will focus on the civil-military rebellion of February 4th, 1992, and the 20 years passed since the popular rebellion of April 13th. 2002, for those are two of the most important events in Venezuelan contemporary political history. And during the development of this Congress, Professor Humberto González from the Luis Bigot International Center for Decolonization Studies emphasized that capitalism seeks to erase the history of the peoples.
There is a permanent invitation in the capital's game and in the capital's discourse to forget. This game of forgetting is a systematic game and is a fundamental game for the self-construction of the system of domination. Because the game of oblivion is the game of depersonalization of peoples. People are people as long as they remember themselves and have their history and their narrative.
We'll take a short break now and join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The Russian Ministry of Defense denounced before the UN Security Council that the Pentagon controls around 60 biological laboratories near the Russian and Chinese borders. Russian military authorities claim that the U.S. administration is taking advantage of international legislation to constantly increase its biological military capabilities in various regions of the world. Based on data from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the Russian authorities warned that Washington runs at least 336 laboratories in 30 states outside its national jurisdiction. This adds to what has already been denounced by Moscow about an investment fund made by Hunter Biden, businessperson and son of the U.S. president, a lad that was involved in funding biological programs on the territory of Ukraine. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova has warned about the intentionally disordered promotion of events in Bucha. Speaking to Sputnik News Agency Radio, Zakharova said that internet platforms have joined in spinning story related to the city of Bucha and the criminal provocation that took place there. In her opinion, the civilian killings staged there exceeds all limits because it was done intentionally, according to a plan, not in the fervor of emotion. Zakharova said the images show real dead people, but she wonders about how they ended up on those streets and who killed them. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Ukraine of boycotting the dialogues held between Kiev and Moscow.
We are concerned that the Ukrainian side has decided to demand that in case of signing the agreement, which I'm talking about now, all combat actions must be stopped in several days and Russian armed forces must leave Ukraine. After this, there will be an alleged referendum ratification in the parliament. There is a strong possibility that when the ratification and referendum give a negative result, we'll need to start negotiation process anew. We don't want to play such cat and mouse.
Likewise, Lavrov called on the Ukrainian side to make efforts to de-escalate the conflict.
In order to have real progress, rather than its pretense, we insist that a clear signal must be sent to Kiev, not to carry out sabotage, otherwise we risk of repeating the fate of the Minsk agreements. We will never accept it.
Russia's defense ministry accused Ukraine of sabotaging a pre-agreed prisoner swap and mistreatment of Russian captives. Defense ministry official Mikhail Minziev claimed that Kiev also blocked prisoner exchanges.
The plan for today's swap of prisoners of war has been derailed by the Ukrainian side. The list of 251 military troops in the swap has been repeatedly updated during the last 24 hours. The number of POWs has been repeatedly reduced. The list of 38 military personnel agreed at the last stage has been rejected by the Ukrainian side this morning without explanation. The Russian side has all the reasons to suggest that the military of the Russian armed forces who are in captivity are not okay. Furthermore, it's reliably established that Russian military personnel are subjected to torture, violence, bullying, which in their humanity copies the actions of punishers in the years of World War II.
And from Mariupol, we have a direct contact with our special envoy, Alejandro Kirk, reporting at the main warehouse of the city, where supplies are being collected to be later distributed among the citizens. Medicines, water, food, and even toys for children are among the goods for the population. We pass the signal to the live report to have more details. Go ahead, Alejandro.
This is the main warehouse of Mariupol, where the distribution of food, supplies, water, medicines, and toys even for children is taking place, centralizing this effort to help the population of Mariupol, a city ravaged by intense combats for the last 3 weeks. The fighting still goes on, but it is centered at the Stal Azovstal, actually the steel works that once in history provided for most of the steel of the Soviet Union. The Nazi battalions and Ukrainian forces are surrounded there, and they keep fighting. Some have already surrendered, and it is expected that this fight will end soon. We came over with 2 trucks of help from Russia, organized by several organizations, Russian organizations that are committed to provide supplies for this city, and more than that, to provide help in order to restore the city life, which has been severely broken by this war. Many people have left the city, but many remain in dire need of help. We spoke with some of the organizers. This is what they had to say.
All the local authorities helped us to overcome all the bureaucracy. We arrived quickly and everything is fresh off the conveyor's belt. Among them are sweets, gingerbread from Tula, sweets from Tbilisi, and rubleka sausages from the best Russian companies. And the essential is water and medicines. But I hope that this city will revive, that it will be a tourist city, like the old Soviet times. Both Muscovites and St. Petersburgers will be able to rest here, in the city of the Sea of Azov. It was always very much loved by the children, and that's why I think things will work here. Life will get better. All this will end. It's all temporary. We all know that. Humanitarian aid is a fest. Public agencies and patrons of the arts. But our task is not limited to this humanitarian convoy, but also to the delivery, that is, to the constant organization of the delivery of the humanitarian convoys of the peoples of Russia to the people of Ukraine. There is a role here, not only in the humanitarian component, but even more perhaps in this people's public diplomacy, which has a key role today in building relations between peoples. Today, if the residents of Mariupol are being tested by difficulties to all of us, including you.
This is it for now from Mariupol.
Thank you, Alejandro, for this special report. That was Alejandro Kirk, our special envoy to Mariupol in the region of the Donbass. Now we continue to other topics. The United Nations General Assembly will vote on suspending Russia from Human Rights Council on Thursday. For Russia to be suspended from the Council, 2/3 of the countries, some 140, must vote in favor of this resolution. In this regard, Russia's representative to the UN, Vasilin Imbezia, stated that the decision to exclude Russia from the multilateral body does not help the situation in Ukraine. The meeting was scheduled after White House spokesperson Jen Psaki and the U.S. permanent representative to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, called for support to suspend Moscow from the Council due to the nation's military operation in Ukraine. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Thousands of Sudanese demonstrators marched in the nation's capital and other cities Wednesday in new protests against a military coup that plunged the African country into political turmoil and aggravated its economic woes. The protests represent the latest of a series of efforts by the Sudanese people to demand civil rule from the generals who took over power in October. Demonstrators marched in Khartoum and in Omdurman amid tight security around the presidential palace. The army's takeover upended Sudan's transition to democracy after 3 decades of repression and international isolation under autocratic President Omar al-Bashir. A popular uprising had forced the military to remove al-Bashir and his Islamist government in April 2019. And former Burkina Faso's president, Blaise Compaoré, was sentenced to life in prison over Thomas Sankara murder on Wednesday. The verdict came 6 months after the trial of 14 accused in the assassination of the country's revered Pan-African leader started. The landmark trial opened in October 2021, 34 years after Sankara was killed in a coup that brought Blaise Compaoré to power. In addition to Compaoré, there are 2 sentenced to life in prison. Hyacinthe Kafando, suspended of having led the commander that murdered Thomas Sankara and the commander of Compaoré's guard at the time of the events, as well as General Gilbert Diendéré, one of the army leaders of the 1987 putsch. The 3 men were convicted on attack on state security. Compaoré and Diendéré were also found guilty of complicity in murder and Kafando of murder. And Iran gave the way to the construction of entirely national nuclear centers, which will allow for a breakthrough in the country's nuclear technology. The head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Mohammad Eslami, pointed out that the measure seeks to satisfy the needs of the people in terms of power generation. The official went on to point out that the coordination and studies carried out in the scientific and research centers will help the country to achieve a better level in the field of power plants. Eslami also said that the fuel monopoly was broken by Tehran by developing a completely national cycle. Israeli police cracked down on Palestinians at Bab al-Maud, also known as Damascus Gate, in the occupied city of East Jerusalem amid the Ramadan festivities and in the eve of Passover. For the 4th night in a row, Israeli police on Tuesday night cracked down on Palestinians gathering at Bab al-Maud in the occupied city of East Jerusalem. Heavily armed police officers used rubber-coated steel bullets, stun grenades, and batons to disperse Palestinians gathering at one of the main gates of the old city of Jerusalem. 12 Palestinians were arrested in the course of the clashes, and according to the Red Crescent, the crackdown left 1 Palestinian citizen injured. For many Palestinians in Jerusalem and throughout the occupied Palestinian territory, Ramadan is directly connected to Al-Aqsa Mosque, located in part of the internationally recognized Palestinian territories that have been occupied by the Israeli army since 1967. On Wednesday, Pakistan's Supreme Court continued the hearing of petitions seeking to undo the dissolution of parliament by Prime Minister Imran Khan, which set the stage for snap elections. The court has been hearing arguments from Khan's lawyers and the opposition since Monday and will announce the decision as soon as possible. The legal battle started on Sunday when Khan's ally and Pakistan's Deputy Parliament Speaker Qasim Suri dissolved the National Assembly to sidestep a no-confidence vote that Khan appeared certain to lose. The opposition claims this was against the Constitution. Khan accuses the United States of helping these political opponents in their plans to oust him, saying Washington wants him gone because his foreign policy favors Russia and China. The U.S. denied these accusations. We move on to other topics. Children in some drought-stricken areas in Ethiopia have dropped out of school as they have to leave their hometowns and take refuge in other places with their parents. Statistics show that over 400 schools in the worst affected regions of Somali and Oromia have been completely closed, and another 700 schools partially closed. Ethiopia is grappling with a severe drought as nearly 7 million people in the drought-hit regions need urgent help after a third failed rainy season devastates farmer communities. The drought conditions in the country's lowland area, which includes the Somali and Oromia regions, have led to a 20% increase in cases of severe acute malnutrition in children, according to the UNICEF. Gianfranco Rotigliano, representative of the international organization in Ethiopia, said they are setting up a system called Betty, where children can get basic education, psychological assistance, and protection assistance.
More than 500,000 children have dropped off of school. So we are trying to set up a system that is called BETE, that is education and protection, where children can go, they can get basic education there, and they can get also psychological assistance and protection assistance.
Now we move on to other topics. The director of the Pan-American Health Organization, the WHO, cautioned that the Omicron BA.2 variant of the COVID-19 virus is spreading throughout the region, and cases are rising once again. Dr. Carissa Etienne told on a weekly COVID-19 news conference that Omicron BA.2 were detected in 8.7% of the sequences reported from South Africa in the global databases. Etienne explained that some countries in the region relaxed their COVID-19 protocols prematurely as travel restrictions loosened, case counts rising in the places that rely on tourism, especially in North America and the Caribbean.
Over the last few weeks, many countries and territories in the Americas have scaled back public health measures, and some have done so prematurely. As travel restrictions have loosened, case counts have risen in places that rely on tourism, especially in parts of North America and the Caribbean, where vaccination coverage is low.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.